distinguished guests, all protocols. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of you. My name is Julia Hawkins, and I'm honored to be MC for the event. I also have the great privilege to serve as treasurer on the new board of the American Chamber of Commerce in Mauritius. Now is an exciting time for AmCham Mauritius, and today's event reflects our commitment to bringing timely, strategic conversations to the forefront of economic and innovation dialogues in our region. Welcome to our executive event, FinTech in Africa Vision 2030. The FinTech landscape across the continent is evolving at an incredible pace, offering tremendous opportunities for inclusion, innovation, and of course, investment. Today, we'll hear leading voices across the public and private sector on how we can collectively shape this future and explore the vital role that US partnerships and companies can play in supporting this growth. To officially open our session, it is my pleasure to invite a dynamic leader and our very own President of AmCham Mauritius. Please welcome Ms. Jessica Naga.
His Excellency, Mr. Jardine, US Ambassador to Mauritius, Ms. Shamila Bima, Director of Bank of Mauritius, Ms. Remy Odiet, Director of Financial Services Commission, Mr. Akash Mishra, Head of FinTech at the Financial Services Commission, Mr. Shomika Lakshman, Country Director at MasterCard, Ms. Manisha Dukoni, Chairperson of Mindex, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to you all. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you today to this joint event of AmCham Mauritius and Mindex. I was invited to an AmCham panel discussion similar to today 2 years ago. It was in February 2023, to be precise. And after the panel event, just like today, then it was done jointly between AmCham and Partager. I was invited to join AmCham. And it has been an incredible journey for me of connection, of friendship, and of business partnerships. And thanks to AmCham Mauritius, I am today here before you, able to bring a crowd to look at what the future could be. So let me first of all present to you the new board. We are all here today and would be happy to chat to you during the networking session after. We have clear objectives about what we wish to achieve over the next 2 years, and they are as follows. Trade and investment facilitation, advocacy and policy influence, business networking and membership growth to have more of a voice, capacity building and knowledge sharing, digital transformation and communication strategy. We want to connect the AmChams that exist. There are 130 of them in the world, many in Africa. Our goal is to connect and be able to bring better business throughout the continent. Mauritius might be a small country, but we are great at friendship in diversity. We have today public sector, private sector, regulators, and foreigners sitting side by side, by virtue of what we do and what we want to achieve, and not where we're from, and having a common vision of creating a better Mauritius for all of us. We understand that through collaboration, we have a louder voice. So join us, follow us, partner with us. We dream big and do our utmost to deliver on our promises. So if you will allow me now, I would like to say a few thank yous before declaring this event open. Firstly, to the previous board, and especially Ravin Lama, where is he? Yeah. Who has been an incredible president. We today stand on your shoulders and intend to build on what you have already done. So thank you. To the US ambassador and his team at the US Embassy in Mauritius, especially Joanna Chan and Anjana Chikoi. Where are you? They're there. We thank you for the ongoing support you have given AmCham throughout the past year and ongoing. To the present and future AmCham members here, you can scan this and join us. Thank you for your trust. To the new board. Let us build this organization to the best that it can be over the next 2 years. Please be active members. Be vocal and engaged. Do complain, we don't mind. That is the only way we can improve on what we do. To the panel members in front, thank you for having made the time to be with us today. You are the ones that have allowed us to attract this excellent crowd. Thank you to the AmCham board members and to the Mindex team who have worked a lot to make this event successful. Last but not least, thank you to the EDB and Vinay, especially for having immediately said such an easy yes to our request to use these facilities to have an introductory speech by you. We are very thankful. With these, I declare this event open. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Naga. Next, we are pleased to hear from one of the key institutions, heart of financial development and innovation in Mauritius. Please welcome the Director of Financial Services at the Economic Development Board, Mr. Vinay Gide.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, Your Excellency, Ambassador Henry Radin, Ambassador of Mauritius, United States of America, to Mauritius institutions. But yes, the work that you do for us, in many ways, you are an ambassador to us, as well in the US, and I would like to thank you for the work that you have done. Under your leadership, we've done a promotional mission to the USA in 2023, September, and we had Prosper Africa who came to Mauritius, we had Citigroup, and we had Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, who came as well. So and then another set of 10 to 12 American operators were here in October last year. So that was wonderful. Thank you so much for the support that you gave. So that's why I said Ambassador of Mauritius, rightly so. And yes, of course, Jessica Naga, President of AmCham, Past President, Mr. Ravin Lama, my colleagues from the FSC, Mr. Mishra, Mrs. Rennie Audit, and all friends, colleagues who are here today, welcome. I won't be long. I just want to share a little bit about, how FinTech is the evolution. You all know, currently about $300 billion industry and expected to become over $1 trillion by 2030 with a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of over 16%. So of course, it's a sector that really wants to invest, look into. And there are numerous challenges because that's a sector that's never static, it's always dynamic. We sleep today, tomorrow there's a new technology that's coming in, and we have to run and chase that new technology, get the skill, get the talent, get the know-how. And what's fascinating about this forum today is that we are working together with colleagues that are collaborating with American companies, organizations, institutions, the SEC. The FSC is working with the SEC, trying to working towards an MOU, from what I understand, so that could help us really set the stage, having a special sort of relationship, and maybe we could ask the USA to use Mauritius as a pilot case. We're a small jurisdiction, we're very flexible, malleable, we can test products and services for the African continent, and if it works, it can be rolled out to the USA as well. So we have numerous opportunities to collaborate. These slides just elaborate on the ecosystem and other things. But I think we're here for that collaboration, for that sharing of opportunities that we identify. We'll be talking today about the strength. Now we have strength. If we do a SWOT analysis, commercial strength, we all know the stability, political stability, the way that we protect investment into Africa. And then we have opportunities that we can identify together. We know the weaknesses. We're working towards that. We're trying to complement that with training, development that we're doing to get the skills, the talent, the people, the companies to come here and really embellish the ecosystem that we have. And we have threats as well. When we talk about cryptocurrency, we're a small economy. Do we mix the cryptocurrency with the fiat currency? These are questions that need to be answered. We have regulators here that needs to look at the risk. And at the end of the day, what do? We do SWOT analysis. We look at the opportunities that we have, we build on the strengths that we have identified, and we try to eliminate the weaknesses and mitigate the threats. And if we can do that together, we should have a solution together, to fix or take advantage of FinTech in Africa, especially Africa. Africa is a continent that's growing fast, 17% of the world population, fastest growing demography in the world, and only 35% of banking services access, market penetration, 3.25% of insurance service penetration. And if you look at the gap in finance, the IMF said there's at least only on structural projects $200 billion of financing gap on the continent annually. Now we know there's no major global bank in Africa. The top 50 banks, none of them are in Africa. So how do we close that gap? The financial institutions are shying away because of the risk perception. So they have to rely a lot on DFIs. And there's so much that we can get from that. We need private equity, we need private finance in Africa. And we need to be able to unlock new opportunities. And what does FinTech offer to us when we tokenize investment opportunities? We can tap into a wider set of investors that could buy a token of $1,000. So this is what FinTech gives to us, and that's what we need to work together and try to unlock that potential for the continent. And then it's going to be a win-win-win situation, win for Africa, win for Mauritius, and win for all investors. So thank you for your time, and looking forward for this wonderful event for you today.
Thank you, Mr. Day. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we now move into the core of today's agenda, a panel discussion titled FinTech in Africa Vision 2030. This session will dive deep into the opportunities and complexities facing the African FinTech ecosystem, and how both regional leadership and international partnership, particularly with the United States, can play a pivotal role in this evolution. Moderating today's session is someone with a wealth of experience in law, finance, and cross-border matters. Please welcome partner at Appleby Mauritius, Ms. Sharmila. Thanks. Joining her on stage are distinguished panelists. Please, come take a seat. His Excellency Henri de Jardin, U.S. Ambassador to Mauritius and Seychelles. Ms. Renu Udi, Head of Strategy at the Financial Services Commission of Mauritius. Mr. Shumika Lichman, Country Director at MasterCard. And once again, our Ms. Jessica Naik, President of AmCham Mauritius and CEO of Mendix Group. Let's welcome our panelists with a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thought after 25 years at the bar, my voice would be loud enough to carry through. It's an honor to be moderating this session today. And the great advantage of having someone from the FSC to speak about FinTech in Africa means that I do not need to justify why Africa and why FinTech. So I'll just say that from my understanding, there's momentum in Africa. There's momentum in Africa because business models have proved to be highly successful, and as it has been rightly said, the world is taking notice of Africa. So, especially with the COVID-19, which has in fact been the major catalyst for technologies such as FinTech to come forward. So I'll go straight into the topic by asking from an insight from His Excellency Mr. Jardine. So you will have heard about the Government Vision 2030, Mr. Jardine, and FinTech, obviously, the role of FinTech, which the government wished to put into perspective. So my first question to you is, how do you think that the US can partner with players to support this vision? And I say this especially given the fact that we know the SVB was a basically FinTech-based customer base and had a remarkable but unfortunate demise in a very short lifespan.
Well, first of all, Sharmila, thank you very much. Thank you very much for chairing this discussion. It's great to have you here. And also, real quick, I would just like to congratulate the board. I've had a chance to see some of the board members, the new board. I've worked with them. Some of them were on the previous board, and it's been a real pleasure to work with AmCham. And I'm very excited to see the new board members and look forward to working with them as well. And congratulations to Jessica on being the president. I think we're going to have to start playing Hail to the Chief whenever she walks into the room. But no, congratulations, and great to have you as the president. Look forward to working with you. And again, Robin, thank you for your great leadership over the last couple of years. It's been wonderful working with you, and really appreciate where you have taken AmCham and the fact that we can have these kinds of programs, this kind of interaction, and an opportunity to talk about these kinds of issues. You know, the opportunity to talk about FinTech is great for us here at the U.S. Embassy. Our key focus, and you know, it was said, I do feel like I am somewhat the U.S. ambassador, or the Mauritian ambassador to the U.S., because I often feel like I am put in that position of advocating and highlighting the opportunities for Mauritius. And, you know, again, clearly one of the key sectors or industries that Mauritius has been able to develop and to do well at is in the context of the financial services. My understanding, and it's also a key relationship, trade relationship, commercial relationship with the United States. As I understand, about over $70 billion US comes to Mauritius from the United States through the financial services networks here, which I think is really a great testament of how this idea of financial services as Mauritius as a platform, it's a reality. It's very much, you know, we're not talking about this in the abstract. It's something that's very substantive, very real. In addition, it's a sector that's seeing growth and more potential and opportunity, and it really warrants our conversation here. So I think the question you asked, Sharmila, is what can the U.S. do to help? And I think we look at it across a number of different areas. When you think about what it is strategically, I think that the government wants to do here, we want to be supportive of that effort. And I think there's a couple of broad areas in which they're working. One is, I think, in the context of the regulatory framework, in areas of ensuring that the regulation and the regulations are in place that provide for an effective, open, transparent, functional financial services sector. And that regulatory framework has to get more complex, I think, as you start thinking about more complex tools. We talk about AI, virtual currencies, and so forth. So the complexities of these sort of financial tools presumes greater complexity on the regulatory side as well. And then as the sensitivities across different sectors, certainly in the United States, I know in Europe, as those sensitivities and the regulatory requirements increase, that framework has to get more complicated. And so from the U.S. Embassy's perspective or side, we want to be supportive of that. And what we have tried to do is to bring in experts and individuals who can advise and consult on these kinds of issues and questions. In the past, our U.S. Treasury Office for Technical Assistance, OTA within the Treasury, has provided advice in that area. We also can look to do more. One of the challenges we have right now, and I think it's one that we're still trying to get visibility on, is what will be the scope of the U.S. support going forward with the new administration that's looking at realigning how it provides support. We will, though, continue to look at those areas where we can be supportive of the regulatory framework, because I think for us, the key thing to keep in mind from the U.S. government, with the new U.S. government, one of the areas, or the three sort of broad categories that we look at in prioritizing what we do globally, is this question of the safety, security, and prosperity of the United States. And so if there's linkages to that, then we see how we can be supportive. And another clear example of how we're doing that when we speak about the regulatory framework is we presently have an FBI agent who's on the ground here, who's helping and training on investigations into, say, financial crimes, working with the FCC, working with the FIU, working with the Mauritian police force, and trying to provide that expertise in how do you monitor, assess, and investigate financial issues, financial crimes, as they get more complicated and sophisticated, and as we see a nexus to the United States, with cases that may see financial transactions coming here through Mauritius. So our goal is to be able to help Mauritius as it puts in place the regulatory requirements and the sort of law enforcement investigative abilities here on the ground, so as to ensure that the environment here is clear and transparent and operational and functional. Then the other element that you look at is sort of the technological infrastructure. Like, what kind of infrastructure can you put in place to facilitate these activities? And again, we've been trying to do a lot of outreach through our contacts to see how we can encourage U.S. businesses that work in this area of technological infrastructure and engaging more with Mauritius, partnering more with Mauritius. As we mentioned earlier, as Vinay mentioned, we did have a number of programs over the past year in which we brought U.S. businesses, some of them IT-related businesses, that would be able to support the technological infrastructure here. So we had their American Business Summit in August, we had the Prosper Africa visit in October, we've had discrete visits by different agencies, whether it's our USGDA or Foreign Commercial Services, thinking about issues related to, say, the financing, the investing, and other aspects of building out the technological infrastructure. Another component when you think about the financial service sector, how do you develop that sector here in Mauritius, it's about talent. And I always talk to a lot of the business community here, and one of the key things that they say is a challenge for them is in the area of talent. There is a lot of good, very capable, talented Mauritians here in Mauritius, but the problem is that, again, I guess sort of the downside of Mauritius' success is that the businesses really demand more people, more skilled personnel to be able to do the technological financial services. And so what we try to do with the talent development is look at opportunities where we can support Mauritian educational institutions. We would do a lot of work through our public diplomacy office in looking at partnering in technical fields with some of the either University of Mauritius or UTM, aligning them with different institutions. MCCI is another where we partnered with them in Stanford University to provide executive training to MCCI through Stanford. We did a partnership with UTM and Madison College in Madison, Wisconsin, looking at more of the technical skill sets that some of their graduates would need in some of these areas related to financial services, accounting, and so forth. So that area of talent development, I think, is going to be crucial for Mauritius as it thinks about expanding the workforce that could then backstop the goals and aspirations it has for its financial service sector. The other element then is the strategic partnerships, thinking about how Mauritius, the government piece is important. Certainly we want to be working with Mauritius in all these different areas I just mentioned to help the government itself in the roles and activities it's doing. I've also talked about the strategic partnership as it relates to trying to build those connections between the commercial piece, bringing businesses here. We're also very intent on taking some of the businesses to the United States, looking possibly November to do a business delegation to the U.S., not November, September, to do a business delegation to the United States in New York to look at some of the financial services sector. So the strategic partnerships, I think, are important because we can bring the tools and the collaboration to support the resources. The other area I would note on the strategic partnership is we do have this Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, the TIFA, that was signed about 10 years ago. And the TIFA is a framework agreement that was signed between Mauritius and our U.S. Trade Representative. We've been looking to see how we can reinvigorate that. Even though it was signed, we hadn't done much on the implementation. But that framework agreement then does give us an opportunity to put some of these activities into context. So we can use the framework agreement to bring more resources from the various agencies to support some of this effort on the financial services. So that's just sort of four broad areas. When you think about financial services, how can the U.S. Embassy, how can the U.S. government be supportive across these sort of four broad areas: the regulatory framework, the infrastructure, the talent development, and then this sort of international partnership piece. And so we at the Embassy are looking at all those areas, and we have already some programming that we're doing and hope to do more for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I think my next question will be a natural progression.
Okay.
So what are the actual changes that you feel, that you anticipate in the African and US partnership that will happen in the next 5 years?
Sure. Well, you're putting me in a sort of awkward spot to predict what will happen in 5 years, but I can't tell you what will happen tomorrow. As you can see, there's a lot of change happening in the United States on almost a daily basis. The new administration has a very sort of very specific goals, objectives that it is taking to sort of roll out its approach. And again, as you can see, it's very focused on the commercial piece. There's been a lot of activity on commercial trade policy. And what I would say is, and also in how we think about Africa, that has a significant impact as well. So one thing that I would predict, and again, I hope you don't come back 5 years from now and tell me, you said X and it didn't happen. So I hope there's no accountability here whatsoever. But what I would say is the first one is a shift away from, in our relationships with Africa, is a shift away from aid. We've given a significant amount of aid. There will be aid that we will give. We will continue to support in areas like public health, issues of security, areas which are of immediate impact. So when we talk about disease, poverty, and security, those areas are priorities in the kind of assistance and aid we'll be giving. But you'll see sort of a de-emphasis on aid. But what that will mean is a greater emphasis on commercial relationships. The effort will be to look at where there's opportunities to develop the commercial relationships. And as I said, the financial service sector here in Mauritius is a success. It's been done very well. So I think there'll be a greater effort on thinking about how we can develop those commercial relationships, and I think that'll be very important. The other piece is to think about, in that shift to sort of a more commercial focused relationship with Africa, is you've got to keep in mind there's a greater focus on U.S. national interests. And I know sometimes it's not as spoken or it's not as specific, but in this instance, this administration is very specific about what is the value for the U.S. While that may seem a bit self-focused, I think ultimately, as they say, every country is focused, its foreign policy is focused on its national interest. In this case, it'll be more explicit. So when you think about those sectors that have an impact for the U.S., where there's a perception of greater impact on U.S. domestic industry, you'll see more of a defensive or protectionist approach. So that's why when the president talks about protecting U.S. businesses, he's talking about tariffs. I don't see that necessarily in these financial services or in the services sector. I see it more in relation to different manufacturing sectors. Excuse me. And so again, I think Mauritius, in a way, if you take it from just the question of the impacts for the relationship with Africa and you focus it more on Mauritius, I think in a way Mauritius is well positioned, especially in the financial services, because it's not as so much that you're competing directly with the U.S. industry as it's complementing the U.S. industry. You have financial services in the U.S. that are very reliant on Mauritius, but only because Mauritius is able to fulfill a role that they would not be able to fulfill, which is to provide a mechanism for investing in Africa or previously for investing in India. And so that mechanism for investing in Africa doesn't necessarily deter or detract from U.S. businesses. So, even though you're seeing an adjustment in the approach that this administration is taking as potentially impacting in some ways other industries or sectors, personally, based on what I'm seeing through the administration's statements, don't see the impact on financial services much and see the potential for financial services as it's mutually beneficial. And I think that's what the administration is looking for, is these opportunities for sort of win-win relationships in commercial and trade. And again, given the focus is going to be on the economic commercial piece, as opposed to a stronger emphasis when dealing with Africa on sort of the aid and assistance piece. Again, I think Mauritius is well positioned. We have not historically had a very large aid presence here. We do not have USAID or other large agencies like that. And so Mauritius has already been sort of part of what I think is the future focus and approach that the administration is going to take in its collaboration in Africa generally. And so positions Mauritius very well to already be sort of on that cutting edge of how we're going to approach Africa generally.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now turn to the regulator, the second regulator. As you would be aware, the FSC has a role insofar as FinTech is concerned. So in the sense that FSC is the regulator who oversees the activities such as crowdfunding platforms, peer-to-peer lending operators, and virtual asset service providers. We've seen that in Mr. Budai's presentation. So, Renu, if I may, thank you for being here today and sharing your insights. So my first question to you is as follows. As regulators, both the Financial Services Commission and the Bank of Mauritius, they have jurisdiction over FinTech, financial technology matters. Now, we've heard the central bank recently, through the governor, about their interest with the blockchain and FinTech. So I now turn to you as the second regulator involved in financial technology and blockchain. So what do you perceive are the challenges which the FSC face in Africa? And do you foresee, in particular, that blockchain and FinTech solutions will help address these current issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Shamila. Firstly, congratulations to Jessica and the team, new to board of chairman. Thank you for inviting me as well. I think it's good to mention, go back into the recent history and look at where our journey for FinTech started. And I think FSC is the regulator for FinTech and innovative solutions and work very in collaboration with Central Bank, of course. I think before I start, I just want to say this because not many I think know this or keep a focus on this, is that as the financial services regulator for non-banking, definitely your core objective is, and the responsibility is to look at the market conduct and the integrity and protect the investors or the consumers, and sort of enforcement actions and licensing and all those things. But I think we are one of those rare regulators. There are a few others like us. But Mauritius does have that objective, where you also have the mandate to look at the new opportunities and the development of the financial services sector and inter alia create job creation. Now that's very rare. At least I can think of two regulators who does that. One is the FCA UK and another one is Singapore. And that creates a lot of different dynamics in the regulatory world, in the sense that you can always try to keep yourself agile and competitive ahead of the game. So I think this is where the FinTech journey started some 6 years back. And I think I was quite privileged to join that journey, and that's my second life in FSC after having spent a decade on the private sector and come back. And the first challenge, you asked me the challenge, so I will just share with you some of the challenges which I have personally experienced, and I'm just putting my own professional and personal views on this. The first challenge was that it's good to have, a blueprint, a strategy going forward. And the challenge comes is, where do you start, right? So for us, the first challenge was, let's look back at our success stories. And I think His Excellency rightly mentioned, and I will just join in on that one, is financial services, particularly investment funds. And I think Vinay did mention, and not to that figure of $70 billion if they're looting through Mauritius from the US, that was a success story. So the question is, how do you use that success story and look at the strength of your existing regulatory framework and say, can you really diversify into digital space? And what a pleasant surprise. legislation which was drafted in 2005 and proclaimed in 2007. And the year is very clear in my head because I was still on this side of the regulatory side, showed the modernity and the strength of that regulation that we didn't have to amend it. And the Commission was able to take a call that we can recognize digital assets as part of the security where it can be used for investment. And I think that was a big breakthrough. And I think that is a good thing of Mauritius being small and modern in its regulatory framework, because some of the traditional supervisors or regulators may not have that flexibility because they have hundreds of years of their legacy, and it's really crafting from new. So that was the first challenge which was overcome, is building on your existing strengths and existing successes of having a good flourishing investment business and fund business, especially in Mauritius. That quickly gave us another spin over in the sense that, okay, can you now issue tokenized securities, right? And use, as we call, the trading platforms which you need for securities. And the answer again was yes, you can. So we simply had to, issue a very lean form of regulatory guide. That was guidance notes, guidelines, as simple as that. No regulation, no legislation. So that showed the strength of the regulatory network. Now, once you've done that, the second thing is, okay, you don't want to miss the boat for the new evolution which is coming in through. What do? So in the around that same time, the regulatory sandbox, I think Mauritius was amongst the first movers to come up with a regulatory sandbox regime. What it did, it actually allowed some sort of a very controlled environment in financial services or in digital space, I may say, where you can come and test those waters. So that was a quick challenge to overcome, that you can open the door to those technologists or fintech players that please come and test the waters in the regulatory space. And I think EDB, Bank of Mauritius, FSC, it was a joint effort put forward, and the interest was really good. And the challenge resulted today that not many, but some have graduated from that regulatory sandbox and sitting in the full-fledged regulatory space today. It also gave regulator a time to assess the risk, the complexity of those services or the products, and then try to work on the full-fledged legislation. Third challenge which came in is, how do you keep yourself compliant with international norms and standards? And that came in when FSC was Mauritius was downgraded on virtual asset, one of the FATF recommendation, which was recommendation 15. So we had to get back to compliant status. Answer is, how do you do that? So then came the requirement that you need to have a full-fledged virtual asset license regulatory regime, and this is where the famous VITOs, as we call it, virtual asset, which regulates the virtual asset service providers and the issues of any token offerings, that full-fledged legislation came in. But that was a blessing in disguise. Firstly, it gave us a full-fledged legislative framework for virtual assets. I think we were amongst the first in Southern and Eastern Africa to do that. And secondly, it made us compliant to recommendation 14 and FATF and get out of the grey list. So these were some of the initiatives, and of course with this comes the whole diversification of the existing successes and keeping the competitiveness on. I think that's the challenges, and particularly if you are sitting in between big continents like Africa, Asia, or between Europe and US as well, is like, how do you add that value? The value comes with the competitiveness. Are you ahead of the game? So first thing as regulators you do is test the waters, engage with the industry, say what is the need, and you start to diversify. So this is where the diversification came thereafter, is putting more, keeping ahead, for example, with cloud computing, with stable coins is a very high, I think, at the moment, so there's been a lot of consultation done in that. So that is a challenge which is ongoing, right, which definitely is being looked into. So this is the journey briefly on the challenges. Second part is what is happening in blockchains and fintech. Is that doable? Answer is yes, absolutely yes. I think the technology use, any sort of DLT, whether it's blockchain or otherwise, it is not for the future, it's happening now. And there is a lot of, urge to get regulated. I think that's where Mauritius comes in very handy. I think if you look at other regulations, for example, people have been talking last year about this whole centralized regulated regime for Europe, MiCA as they call it. It sometimes gets very heavy. And for Mauritius being again, has always grown with the needs of the market and kept itself agile, I think that's where it becomes very user-friendly, I must say. At the same time, you have a place where you can assess the risk and take a proportionate call. How do you mitigate that risk? Let's say if tomorrow you want to come into the space of AI or stablecoins, for example, or other tools, then the question is, do you understand the risk with it? And then what do you do? I think 2022, we had the need to go through the whole national risk assessment for FinTech. And this was done, again, as a part of our initiative to become compliant. And that was a very good insight as to what are the threats which comes along with that side of the industry and what are the vulnerabilities. Threats were between medium to high. We use the World Bank methodology for doing that. But when you looked at the vulnerabilities, that was between high to very high, which means the residual risk for innovation remained high. So what did that mean? So that means that, I think it's a public report, it's on the website. What that means is the people who were interested in that space, whether into the regulatory sandbox or full-fledged license from the Commission, they managed to understand the risk and see how they're going to put the controls around it and how do you mitigate that, including cyber risk. I'm sure we'll have more time to talk about it and a few others of like that. So I think I stop there. Good morning talking. Thank you.
I have another question for you, which devolves from your answers. You've mentioned the magic word risk. So how do you believe fintech companies can ensure, because as regulator, it's not sufficient to have the good regulatory framework, but whenever we talk about fintech, etc., or emerging technologies, we also trigger the related issue of data protection. So as a regulator, what is, in your view, the way in which fintech companies can ensure that ensure cyber security, my apologies, and protect data user?
I think this journey again has not started with just fintech and virtual assets. The journey did start much earlier because we didn't have a full-fledged regime of payment intermediary service providers in Mauritius, PIS, as we call it. We managed, FSC managed the cross-border side of it, and Bank of Mauritius managed the domestic side of it under the National Payment tab. What that did is, of course, you have, for example, mobile wallets is one of the services. You deal with intermediaries, merchants, and so on. So that technology side has always been there in one sense or the other. Parallelly, we also started diversifying that, for example, the investment dealers which we have, and they use a technology-based trading platform outside Mauritius. It's all cloud, through cloud now. We have allowed them to actually have also cryptos in their booking. That's where we call it like a parallel track approach, as some regulators are doing. So you're diversifying traditional into the digital space. So this journey, having built on this journey, what it allowed us is to, against the NRA, which is very AML focused, of course, but that is a risk of anonymity there and the speed with which I think the tokens move or the virtual assets move. So definitely cybersecurity is on top of the risk. So that is what has been done in that respect. Just picking up on this specific example I'll take is let's say when an applicant comes to FSC and in principle approval is given, let's say a digital exchange or a platform or advisor, for example, is in that in principle approval which is given, there is one condition that you have to have the security management system. How do you protect your what is your control environment around security? And the onus is definitely on them to go and reach out to independent experts who can actually look at your whole IT platform or your security framework and give you some comfort and comfort indirectly to the regulator as well that your environment is protected. This is definitely the case at the moment. And then it also gives the licensee, for example, 3 to 6 months to actually roll out their environment and go out to the expert and build it as understanding their risk. And this is then tested. Of course, we expect them to test that as well, at least on an annual basis, and give you response. And of course, most important thing is that someone has to own and be accountable for that. And that's where the senior management comes in. Is like, do you keep eye on the risk side of it? That's very governance-based, I suppose. And last but not the least is the whole training. How do you train in-house your staff or your professionals to take care of this? So I think that that's how, for example, cybersecurity is. I think there is some international norms which are expected to be complied with. I think on ISO, IEC 27001. I'm just repeating as a parrot, that's not my expertise, but these are the requirements usually which are required. And I think the service providers for that are outside Mauritius. I know they are some in Europe, I'm sure there's plenty in US as well. So I think that's something which is the need of that market to manage those risks. Thank you.
Well, we've done some, but we're happy to think of what else we can do. We want to make sure whatever we do is defined by what the need is here and working with the different officers or agencies.
Thank you. Because you're a regulator, I cannot resist the temptation of asking another question. As regulators, as I've already said, both the FSC and the central bank, they have jurisdiction over these emerging technologies, and most prominently FinTech. So, as you're already aware, the central bank of Mauritius presides the Association of African Central Banks. And as regulator, from a regulator's perspective, as one of the regulators involved with these emerging technologies, what innovations as regulator do you believe the FSC anticipates or intends to bring to Mauritius and in the region? I promise there won't be any more questions.
No, I've just kept some cheat notes for myself and I'll prepare them as and when required. I think it would be not fair for your members if I just give you a list of, what are the new things which are in consultation at the moment, like the stable coins and the DeFis and open finance and the likes of those. I think that would not be correct. I think the way forward to that is, and this is how I think our peers in regulatory worlds are talking about, including the international standard setters of which we are a member, like we are a member of IOSCO, for example, the securities, the insurance regulators, GFIN is the innovation, FinTech side of things, and the likes of that. I think what we are talking about is, if you really want to grow that industry of FinTech for digital assets, it has to be purposeful. I'm going to use 2 or 3 P's in that. Purposeful. Purposeful in the sense, what is it adding to the economic indicators right now in the government or at the national level? I think that's very, very important. Second, I think again His Excellency mentioned on the talent pool. I think the skill set. Are we ready only in our regulatory framework? And that is, I think, on the wall of last week. GIFC Index 37 has said we have jumped up for FinTech by 20 points, and I think that's commendable. But the question is that enough? We really need to have a skill set which is ready to service that industry, right? So there's a lot of initiatives, but I'm sure there's more we can do. At the regulatory level, of course, we are a bit more privileged that we get a lot of working groups and visibility and trainings for that. But I think the industry really needs to find some solutions to that, and it's a public sector partnership, of course, which works together. And the thing is, is it that, so that's the purpose, being purposeful. Second thing, I would say that predictability is very important. The second P for me is the predictability. Predictability is having a legislation is one thing. How is that legislation internalized by the operators? I think that is very important. How do you learn from that experience of regulatory sandbox? For example, I think I had the privilege of working with some of the applicants at some point of time in regulatory sandbox and afterwards, where it was very important to understand simple terminology. What is hot wallet? What is cold wallet? We heard these things. What is interoperability? What are dark webs? So we had to ask them, without any hesitation, can you give us a walkthrough? Because this is how we learn as regulators as well. And that was very insightful. So I think that is very important, is that predictability is how do you internalize, how do you roll out those regulatory frameworks or the guidance notes and all those sort of things. The third thing in being predictable is like, what is your USP as Mauritius? Collectively, I think that's again is not regulator to decide, but again a partnership, a collaboration between policy makers and others is what are we selling? We have the strength of, for example, investment funds, FDI, flows and all that, and we have that parallel track system functioning. Now, where do we want to move from there? I think that pointer is very important. Do we want to be the master of all, or jack of all trade and master of none, or master of few? I think our history, if we reflect back on the evolution of financial services over the last 2 decades, I think it's done very well because we got very focused on what we want to do, right? So I think that, to me, that predictability is very important going forward. And as a regulator, I have to mention that. Third P is the proportionality, right? Proportionality means that the regulatory oversight, and this is just reflection, I think, on the regulatory front, is how do you proportionate with the risk you underwrite as an industry? Right? Is it you're going to deal with all the list of, 2,000 or 3,000 cryptos which are evolving every day, or you want to be very focused on a few? Who are your third-party service providers? What due diligence do you do on them? And I must share with you, I don't know how many of you have been following the FATF plenary which just happened in February. It's very interesting to see that. One new element which has come in there on the proportionality from risk management, they're all risk management driven, right? Risk-based approach, as we call it. But the new spin on that which has come in is that you have to apply the risk with the proportionality to the controls you have, or perhaps vice versa. Your proportionality of your controls has to be with the risk you underwrite. So even a non-face-to-face can be a low risk, and you can apply simplified due diligence. And I think they have opened a consultation and a debate on that. And the reason which is driving this consultation and debate is actually the numbers which has come in, that there is 1.4 billion population around the world which is still unbanked, which still we need financial inclusion. So financial inclusion, which is part of the FinTech debate, has become a trigger point, even at FATF, to say that you can have the proportionality of risk to the risk you write. So I think that's something very new. I hadn't seen that before, so I'll just share that with you on this. Thank you.
Now that we've heard the diplomatic perspective and the regulatory perspective, now I turn with the most practical point of view, I turn to where the money is. So, Mr. Shomika Lachman, thank you for being with us today. You are at the MasterCard, you are the Director of MasterCard Mauritius, so you have a very privileged overview of how, in your view, FinTech is either disrupting or making a way of its own in the financial sector. So my question to you is this. What future trends do you foresee for FinTechs in Africa over the next decade? And naturally, since you're at MasterCard, what, in your view, how is MasterCard gearing up to support or fight those disruptions?
Thank you, Shabina. Let me first and foremost congratulate the new board of AmCham, Jessica's president, and number two, beautiful audience, some fantastic people that I know here. And it kind of strengthens the audience, the panelists, the discussion points. Before I get to the point of your question in terms of disruption and where the money is, I'd like to just reflect back on a few points. One, okay, Vinay has moved. Vinay was talking a bit about Africa in the first place, right? In terms of fintechs, in terms of demographics, this is where we're seeing exponential growth in the population numbers. I like Renu's point around financial inclusion as well, because this is a big agenda for us. And when you think about Africa, Africa is one of the most underpenetrated banking population that we've got around the world, right? Just to give you an example, since we're on the topic of Africa, if you look at Madagascar, Madagascar has got a population of 25 million people, right? 18 million adults, and guess what? The banking population is less than 4%. It's that bad. But, and even better, Renu also made reference to mobile payments, mobile wallets, right? And when we come down to the mobile wallet environment, that falls directly under the fintechs, right? The reason why I stress that, in my experience of working with banks, i.e. financial institutions, non-banking financial institutions on the other side, which includes a lot of the fintechs, clearly we see a big difference in strategy in the first place. Banks love what they do traditionally, right? And well, they tend, I call it tend to adopt new practices, technology, but in a very phased manner as compared to fintechs. Fintechs are more disruptive, more agile, and they're getting their decision-making processes straightforward. Coming back to Mauritius very quickly, if we look at both the first and the second regulator, it's the first time I've heard first and second regulator, but yeah, it's fairly unique to Mauritius. Number one, very welcoming, very open to listening, and I think I'll tap myself a little bit for missing a gap in terms of engagement with the second regulator on the learning and sharing approach. I honestly feel, and I appreciate Renu's point about, as regulators, you guys are also learning about the tricks of the industry, how the industry is evolving. Number one, when you look at the fintechs, our technology today, worldwide, is about 5, 6, 7 years ahead of Mauritius. Just to put it bluntly. Simple things like tap on phone, proper digital wallets, like you use your phone with a virtual card on it. We talk about great stuff like virtual assets, tokenization, great. But we don't even have something as basic as this in Mauritius. Why? Because it requires investments by the banks. This is where I honestly think fintechs are going to be, fintechs are the future right now. They have the investment, they have the funding. His Excellency mentioned USTDA, for example, which I had the opportunity of meeting them for a roundtable discussion, a year back. Pretty cool in terms of how they have proper guidelines to do this. We have a couple of associations around fintechs in Mauritius, the Mauritius Africa FinTech Hub. There's another recent association that has been built out, right? And I know there are several committees that are being set up at the regulatory level. But again, it's not just the regulatory level side that we need to see these committees. We need to see the industry evolving towards sharing the learning with our regulators, so that there's that harmonization between the regulation. And you made me laugh a little bit when you were talking about guidelines, which are there. But honestly, in practice, very often what I see is the regulators tend to apply the guidelines as regulations. Sorry to say, but yeah, right? They say, oh, but the guidelines say this, so, you know, we have to follow this. But today we are in an era where the technology is moving faster. We're looking at alternative solutions, which are popping left, right, center. And Vinay was earlier talking about, oh, we don't have banks in Africa that feature in the top 10 or top 50 of the world. Totally agree. But when you look at Africa, some of the big groups like Equity, KCB, etc., are actually embracing alternative solutions. I'm trying to avoid alternative payment solutions, right? Not to be biased about the payment world, but really, you know, just last week, for instance, we've got some super talented people here in Mauritius as well, and I cannot fully agree more with you, Your Excellency. Just last week, I met with a FinTech in Mauritius who was showing me a brilliant solutions where they were connecting the dots across the whole business model of an SME. Payment, invoicing, you know, getting the orders out, tracking the stocks, the works. I think where we, particularly in Mauritius, but not in Africa, is we have a lot of willingness. We consider a lot of great blueprints, strategy papers, but to support that, that's where I feel we've got a gap to plug in. Tremendous value in terms of Africa and in terms of fintechs. You know, you look at names like Peach Payments, who's making a name for itself in the region. You look at MEPS, very closer to us, which is very much a local operator, which is getting there. I'll give you some stats very quickly just to tell you how we don't feel it as consumers, but amazing under-penetration when it comes down to serving the SME sector. We have 200,000 SMEs registered in Mauritius today, and that contributes like, what, 40% of the economy. Guess what? Less than 7% of that is enabled to accept card payments. Simple thing. Why? One, the investment required by the banks is sometimes, not sometimes, mostly the root cause to prevent that natural progression to happen. Number two, when you think about the SME sector, literally in Mauritius, again, you've got that mix of sole traders and the SME business being, you know, mingled together. But then on the other side, fintechs are coming in and saying, hey, actually, I can give you better rates, quicker technology, right, faster payments. And when we look at traditional banking, sorry, I'm trying to give a bit of a comparison between banking services and where fintechs make a big difference. Simple example, today you have a few banks in Mauritius which are present here, present in India. We've been talking about the Mauritius-India corridor for years, for decades rather, right? Where I think Rubina would agree with me being here in the room. An investment onto the stock market in India needs to happen instantly, and the money needs to reach before the market opens. And banks today cannot do that transfer within seconds, but they take T+1. So the money reaches the next day. What's the risk associated with that? Guess what? Fintechs can do the same transaction within 30 minutes on the same day. Purely by using the technology, the ability to leverage on accounts globally. So literally, we have to ask ourselves the question. We have the regulatory framework. Mauritius has a strong reputation as being a financial center. Let's forget about the FATF part for a minute, but literally, it's been for years as the backbone of financial services for Africa. Even at some point in time, we were talking about Mauritius being like the Switzerland of Europe for wealth management, etc. But guess what? We are today facing a situation where lack of investment, by the traditional operators. Lack of decision-making process to make things happen quicker in terms of value adders. We have framework, but we don't have a lot of support from a regulatory perspective to make things happen quicker. I'll give you an example, the payment regulations that came 2 years back. Tells you PSP license, great, fantastic. I saw that in, I think in your slide earlier with the PSPs, PIS license, etc. Anybody in the room who has applied for a license, a PSP license, can say that the regulation actually stipulates 1 month. Guess what?
10 days.
For you, it's 10 days, okay. In practice, we're talking about the practical one, right?
Why did it complete?
Does it take 10 days? Does it take 1 month? Take months. Take months. And that's where I said, for me, I realized today there's a little bit of gap, and I love the suggestion I was saying. We as operators should open our doors to the regulators also to come in and learn. Because that is probably going to make things happen quick, faster, and understanding what's going on outside of Mauritius, outside of Africa. So yes, to answer your question, in very short terms, fintechs are going to be very disruptive as long as they have the appropriate support, both environmentally, economically, regulatory.
So from what you've just told us, I think my next question will be a natural one, flowing from what you have just said. So, how, in your view, could traditional financial institutions collaborate with fintech companies to drive innovation? Because that's what fintech is about, being disruptive, means you're fostering innovation.
That's a brilliant question, Sharmila. A couple of things. I think the mindset within the traditional operators, and when we talk about traditional operators, we talk about the banking industry, need to totally change. We understand risks are associated, but risks dictates controls and mitigants around this to help have a safe environment, right? That's number one. Number two, there's a lot of dependencies when we talk about, today, it's no secret that there's shortage of US dollars in the market, right? Some customers, if you want to call it, SMEs in particular, they go to the bank and say, hey, I need to buy $50,000 of goods from China or from India, wherever it is. They're given like $10,000 this week, another $10,000 next week, until they make up for the 50. That's proper disruption to their business, right? And you take a step back on this and you think about, can the banking industry, support the economy? Yes. How? Adopting alternative solutions. Example, we do not have to depend so much on the US clearing members or USD. It's there for a purpose. It's been a strong currency. Today we are seeing Rupee coming into Mauritius, for instance, Rupee going into Africa. Rupee has just been recently enabled in Singapore, right? When you think about the international trades that are happening, a lot of them are thinking of alternative solutions like paying in other currencies, etc. How do the bank can decrease the reliance on correspondent banks? You were talking about what BOA came down, Citi came down. Great. But there's a lot of protectionist approach as well. And what I mean by protectionist approach, Vinay, is the impose quotas, thresholds, saying, okay, you need to give me so much volume for me to continue servicing you. And that becomes, again, a challenge for the market, but the banks can solve for that in a lot of ways. The final point I'd like to make on traditional players, I think, again, and I must appreciate, especially the top banks in the country are making a lot of efforts. making a lot of efforts in terms of embracing fintechs, supporting fintechs, as compared to the global banks. Global banks are saying, well, wait a minute. Number one, when we talk digital currencies, we talk cryptos, we talk, blockchain, they always say, okay, that's a high risk, because they don't understand a lot of it. Or they're thinking, why would a client, a big client who's going to trade into cryptos, be sitting out of Mauritius? Because the connotation of it's offshore, jurisdiction, etc. But guess what? The local banks have the ability to plug in that gap because they have the power to take decisions new. Of course, there's always the challenge of having to go through the correspondent banks, because at the end of the day, the policy impacts everybody who is associated with the correspondent banking services. But again, I reiterate, we have alternatives in the likes of currency agencies that support these kind of businesses. I can name a lot of them. But then, we have other currencies like euros, etc., while keeping the US dollar stronger and supportive. I hope that makes sense.
I have left the best question as the last question for you. So from what you say, what is the future of payments?
So future of payments, everybody is talking about digitalization. Great stuff, and I totally believe in that. I'll give you a simple example. You look at the panelists here, I'm the one paperless right now. So,
I'm old school, I got
it's just a question about adopting the approach, right? These fintechs, digitalization, this is going to be the future of payments, the future of everything that we do, right? Who would have thought 30 years back that, today your phone is tracking everything that you do and it's giving you suggestions. Hey, you should go there, or you visited X places. Just giving you a simple example. This is one thing, we don't leave home. If I forget my phone at home, I actually go back. Not because of the wife, but really because this is something that today my bank is on my phone. What, 15, 20 years back, everybody had a memory that was amazing, would remember every telephone number. Today I can tell you, even sometimes for my wife, I have to check what's the number. It's simply because the way digitalization has changed our everyday life, it can only grow from there. So I think the future has to be digitalization right now. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but we have some 5, 6 years of gap to catch up. And it can be done. If we do it now, in 5, 6 years, we will be at par with everybody else in the world. That's my humble view.
Thank you, Shomika. So now I turn myself to Jessica, who's this, apart from being the president of ANCAM, is also the CEO of Mindex. So, yes, you've heard it all from the start. So now the toughest one is for you. What in your view would be the biggest challenges and opportunities facing fintechs in Africa today?
I think my job has been made quite easy by everything that's been said, especially MasterCard saying that the future of everything is digitalization. So thank you very much. I cannot but agree. I think I've told the story many times of why Mindex was created, and it started with a simple thing. I received a payment from Botswana into South Africa, $2,000, and I lost 300, and it took days to come, and I was super angry. And I had come from the UK and moved into South Africa, and I was used to instant payment. I see it on my phone, and now I couldn't understand. And I thought it was the client, it wasn't. I thought it was the bank, it wasn't. It was layers and layers of correspondence. And I think unpacking all of this made me understand a lot of things. And because I was a lawyer and not a finance person, so not trained, I could see it and why it shouldn't be like this. So I think I will start with the opportunity. So for me, the emerging technology is AI, blockchain. It will allow us, the less sophisticated jurisdiction, to leapfrog the more sophisticated one. And I totally concur with Shomika that if we do this right, in 5 years, not 10, the jurisdiction can be transformed. As an IFC, we were one of the leading ones in Africa, for sure. But now, with the conversations that Mendex is having with African players, I have to tell you, we are challenged by them. There are so many incredible companies coming up in many African jurisdictions that I wouldn't say as easily that we are the IFC leading the continent anymore. However, I agree with Renu. I think the law, the regulation here, is incredibly clear. So for a lawyer like me, that's a playing field. You know, the fact that security tokens fall under securities and virtual asset is clearly defined as a digital representation of value. It can have value for you, no value for me. It's a token, it's a digital token. So basically, it's anything around us. So in the past, you know, in Africa, we understand this very clearly. It's almost impossible to raise capital. There's no liquidity, there's no secondary market. There's no connection between the exchanges. They operate in silo. You look at the figures of IMF, right? What they say is within Europe, 55% of trade is within the continent. In Asia, it's 65%. In Africa, it's 15%. So for us, just increasing that, doubling that, will change so much. So I think that for me, I just see opportunities, for sure. And if we do this right, I don't think we become an IFC greater than the other IFCs. We could be creating a category of our own. Mauritius has got an established offshore sector, incredibly clever people, incredibly disruptive people. I'm going to come to the challenges, but these are things that exist. We have found that we are able to talk to our regulators. We have fights, for sure, but I think the fights have made the company that we've built better, because when we were challenged, we were able to answer them. I'm not just saying this because the regulators are here, and it's not always easy. It really is not easy. It's taken years for us to get this company off the ground, but some of the tests that we've had has made us better. So I really believe that Mauritius could become the FinTech pillar for the region and the bank for Africa if we do this right. Now, the challenges, I mean, they are there, and I think they've been mentioned. Banking is a huge one. Correspondent bank is a huge one. And the response that we get is that there's too much risk, you know. And what we ask is, we just want to sit at the same table and discuss this and find solutions that allow all of us to move. The risks might be because it's not understood. The risk might be because the traditional players, because the business banking business works so well that there is no need to dabble into something else. But the problem is the bank operates like a public service. So for them to not support the fintechs is not a solution and is not going to be a lasting problem, because fintechs, I mean, I say that often, I feel that we are very much like water. We create fintechs to address real problems. We have purpose-driven businesses very often, and therefore that's just another problem. But it would be great if that problem could be resolved in partnership, looking at it together to find real solutions. The invisible problem for fintechs in Africa, and that is something we face as Mendex in Mauritius, for example, is that people often are worried about using smaller companies. I mean, FinTechs are scalable companies, right? But they start out, they're smaller, they're startups, they're SMEs, if we want. And I will say this, we often have large international players reach out to us to be able to service large local players. So the large local players have reached out to them, but they can't service because they're not regulated or they don't have the rails or the understanding, and they will come back to us. So what I will say is it's an African tax to the FinTech. So test us, try us, use us. You might be surprised that we are as solid, that we apply the highest level of everything, and are testing us, will support us to support the jurisdiction.
Now, my second question, if you can think that, again, I hope it's a natural question after your responses, is how do you see the FinTech revolution changing the African landscape?
I mean, the figures are clear. I mean, the population of Africa is just going to be exponentially bigger. So the potential for the continent to change itself is huge. So, like I said earlier, the volume of intra-trade in Africa is 15%, right? So if we increase just that, this intra-trade, through facilitating transactions, payment, inter-country trade, I think that's one of the things that I mentioned earlier as AmCham, which is what we want to do, is we want to connect the AmCham so that we facilitate within this network trade between us. This increase in trade, I think, will be fantastic. It will have a direct impact on simple things, GDP, it will create employment, it will reduce the brain drain, and it will create a stronger local market. I think it will create more efficient solutions that we definitely need. I mean, investment between exchanges in Africa is incredibly hard. If I want to invest into Kenya, I mean, it's complicated. I need a broker here, I need a broker there, I need currency exchanges, there's time zones, there's no currency available. I mean, it's just impossible, when actually there is huge desire for Africans to invest into other African countries. I mean, there's certainly desire for Africans to invest into Mauritius, and we need to be making that easier. You know, like, I think it will address also the unbanked solution, the unbanked problem in Africa, which is very real, and it can be addressed. I mean, mobile phones now will help that, but the underlying rails need to be looked at, and that's again the banking issue. But I am a fervent proponent of tokenization. I talk about it a lot, and I think for me that is the technology, the best use case for blockchain. And when you add AI over that, when you digitalize the asset and you add AI over that, it will change everything. It will change everything. Because then we will not be talking payment anymore. We will be talking swapping of assets, a barter system, easy, quick, cheap. I mean, maybe I'm dreaming this thing, but from the first time that I started using stablecoins, the first time I received a payment as a lawyer in stablecoin, my whole life changed. Because what used to happen is a client tells me, yeah, go ahead, please start it, it's urgent, and I'm going to send you some money. And then you wait a couple of days, and then you've got a check, and maybe the bank is going to call you and say, can I have an invoice for that $2,000 bill? And with this, the client tells me, can you do this work for me? And he sends me the money, and I get it instantly, and it's there, and it's verifiable independently. I mean, that's what it is. So imagine this, we go for lunch, and I don't have money, and I pay you in a bit of gold. That's what's going to happen. And I think that's what can be the solution that changes Africa if banking does not change the way it operates and supports the continent. There will be a solution. This is already a solution. It just needs adoption. But it's cross-border. It's immutable. It's instant. It's fractionalizable. You know, we often say Africa, there is sachetization, right? We don't buy the whole box of medicine we buy. One, because we can afford it. I mean, blockchain allows you to do that in the financial system.
I think my last question to you has to be, again, a natural consequence of your answers for question number 2 is, what in your view would be the long-term consequences if Africa does not adopt FinTech solutions?
I mean, it is obvious, right? We, at the moment, have a continent that is incredibly rich in everything, in sun. I lived for 14 years in Europe. There isn't that much sun. There's energy, there is minerals, there is brain power, there's all of this. And yet, foreign direct investment into Africa is 2%. The mismatch between the wealth and the foreign direct investment into it is clear. If we don't take that leap that is being given to us now, and I say that, and Renu mentioned it, right? This ability to leapfrog. When you have huge legacy of systems, it's difficult to put something new. We don't have legacy. For once, the absence of legacy of a financial system that is well established can be beneficial to us. We can leapfrog. So if we don't take this opportunity, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be 2% of FDI coming into Africa, even though Africa has 30–40% of the world's wealth in it. So I think we need to collaborate. I think we need to look at the problems that we have head on. And I think we need to do it now. I think the opportunity is now. We waste time, it will become harder because everybody else would have done it, and then we've missed the boat. So for me, it is, if EDB agrees, I think we're going to definitely make it, because they'll have to promote it. But no, I think a lot of us agree on this. I can feel this collective desire to change things and to do better. And this panel is very indicative of it, of a regulated private sector, public sector. A US ambassador hugely supportive of Mauritius and having actively done things. And I can say that because I've seen it over the last year that I've been on the board of AMCHA. And that I'm hoping to...
send you some Bitcoin.
You know my address. No, but I'm serious. I mean, with all of this, how can we not make it? Of course we're going to make it. But I think we need to define the vision of what we want to achieve. We cannot do it by just saying we want a digital Mauritius, because it means not enough. We need to want a digital Mauritius, meaning digital KYC, easy. We need to have digital payment, easy. I mean, I went on holiday to Turkey and we were trying to exchange money and it was complicated. They were taking bitcoins and giving cash, and it was so easy and it was normal. And, so we need to be thinking like this. How do we make things easier? These are the problems we have. What are the immediate solutions? What are the longer term solutions? So I think if we do that, and we have the goals, and we have the problem, and we address them, I think in 5 years, we'll be having a very different conversation.
I have a very privileged audience, so now I extend my jurisdiction as a moderator to the audience. So my first question would be to Manisha Dukoni. Thank you for being here today. I have known you during your times on the EU-Africa Rise. So my question to you is, through your extensive exposure, what we can call extensive exposure with Africa, my question is, how do you think that FinTech solutions address issues like poverty and unemployment in Africa?
Thank you very much, Shamina, and thanks for this question. EU-Africa Rise, as you know, was a fund that was put in place by the European Union to fund projects across 25 countries in the in the Eastern and Southern African region. There's one specific project. We've had hundreds of projects that we funded. It was a multi-million-dollar fund, and we financed quite a number of projects. And there's one in particular which is in the FinTech realm, which I am particularly proud of. In Mozambique, we put in a FinTech solution that was created partly by the local people in Mozambique and partly by external support, notably actually from India. And we allowed, through that FinTech solution, women who were waste pickers to exchange the waste they were collecting, and in particular plastic and hard to recycle plastic, to exchange it on a platform, through a FinTech platform. And that meant that after we did an impact assessment of this project, we realized that these women, their revenue increased from the usual $1 a day to $5 a day. And that is a huge, maybe $5 doesn't mean much, but that is a huge impact in the life of a waste picker in Mozambique. So therefore, essentially, when you're talking about this question of poverty reduction, there are real solutions and real simple solutions that can be put in place at relatively reasonable costs as well to bring about these type of solutions. So, and those go along so many other sectors. And it's not just about poverty reduction. It's a lot about, as you mentioned, job creation. We're here, under the realm of AmCham, and we have the ambassador who's here. There is, some of you may know, the Lobito corridor that is being developed, which links essentially Angola to Zambia. And one of the big things that can be put in place here is really the identification, the tagging of critical minerals that are going to go, to the US and to Europe. And those are very simple, these are simple solutions, but these are solutions that can be built. Those minerals, once they are tagged, they can then become a FinTech asset that can be traded on an index platform, for example. What I mean to say is we have today, in Mauritius, we don't have the assets. We have money that comes in, and it's not necessarily Mauritius, it comes from other places. But the actual assets are assets which are African assets. And if we are really to develop our FinTech and looking towards Africa, we really need to have that linkage between those assets and the solutions that we have in Mauritius. Renu, you are very right that we're very much advanced in terms of the laws and regulation, and we see that especially when we're looking at Mindex, when other jurisdictions are talking to us, because they want to learn from Mauritius and see what things are happening here. And this, in some way, the fact that we have a few years, not a lot, but a few years of being ahead of the other jurisdictions, this is also a unique USP for all of us to be able to tap into those, the African markets. I see very much Mauritius as some sort of a platform that allows, in some way, the incubation of a number of projects, but the real assets for me and the real opportunities are really in Africa. And I want to really highlight one thing that Shamika mentioned. He said that in Madagascar, I think the banking penetration is about 4%. MVO, which is one of the e-payment system, phone payment system of Madagascar, has about 10 million users, and the population of Madagascar is about 33 million, depending upon. So it shows the same thing for M-Pesa. M-Pesa in Kenya has about 30-something million users, and the population is about 55 million people. So it shows that where the banks have not been able to bring in solutions, all these other providers are able to bring in solutions. I think in this payment system, for us, Mauritius has been a bit delayed, but I think I'm very happy that we are catching up. But in all these, we all need to work together to be able to build in that sort of a framework here in Mauritius, and the actual projects that are going to tackle those solutions, find out which solutions need to be tackled to address those across the continent.
To be honest with you, I'll make the most of the fact that you have this extensive exposure through your Africa Rise experience. So I cannot resist the temptation of putting another question to you. You've been too comprehensive in your answer, so that's where we get. So in your view, what are the key success factors for the FinTech startups in Africa?
Well, I would say, as FinTech startups in Africa in general, first is the jurisdiction. So in Mauritius, when we're looking at Vitus, for example, we have a comprehensive law, which is very good. Guidelines, regulations, etc. Everything is there. So I think having that first now. The second thing, though, we cannot look at FinTech as being just an African play just for Africa. We also need to fit into the larger realm of things, into the international financial system. And that becomes a challenge because Africa or African entities are considered to be high risk. And this means that very often, even if you have a great solution, you still, your growth is kind of held back because you cannot plug into the international system. You cannot raise funds outside, or you cannot open a bank account, for example. You cannot do international transactions. There are so many blockages that come in. Now, how this is being addressed, I don't know, but given the fact that we are really under the umbrella of AmCham here, I think Jessica mentioned that linking up with the other AmChams, linking up with other entities could be ways to address and also raise those issues. Because today, when we're looking at the international financial system, the US plays a big role in the international financial system, and same with Europe as well. But I would say the leader in international financial system is the US. When you're looking at correspondent banks, for example, it's the US correspondent banks that are, let's say, making or breaking companies in some way. So these are real things that needs to be tackled, and when we are looking at those, it's one. And of course, access. I think many of you have mentioned that the access to finance is a big issue, but this is being addressed more and more. And usually, when you're looking at FinTech and FinTech-related solutions, it doesn't cost so much to put in place, but expanding it, growing it cross-border. These are the things that make it a bit more expensive for putting it in place.
Vinay, thank you for being with us, and especially staying in the front row. I hope you were not expecting to get away with it so slightly. So my question to you is, what in your view, from the EDB's perspective, would be the long-term consequences if Africa does not adopt FinTech solutions? I know I've asked this before, but we want to hear your perspective now, please.
Well, I think it's going to be more of the same if it does not adopt FinTech. You mentioned that already. Africa is a continent that's endowed with a lot of richness, 30% of the mineral reserves, 60% untapped arable land of the world. 17% of world population, fastest growing demography, expected to reach 2.5 billion by 2050. Fast growing demography, if Africa doesn't industrialize, doesn't create wealth, doesn't create jobs, then I think, Excellency, you'll have to ask the president to put more borders on the eastern side of America as well. So we need to avoid that, because it's going to be creating massive global social issues when people are going to take dinghies and cross oceans to find greener pastures elsewhere. So we need to avoid that. We need to ensure that Africa delivers on its promise. It managed to capture funds, it managed to receive funding and transform the commodities, the richness that it has, into higher value products and create wealth for the people. And the way to do that is to plug the gap with new technology, with FinTech products. And we talk about raising capital, we talk about, I was at the Africa conference 2-3 years ago, Africa Venture Capitalist Association, and they were celebrating that they hit $100 billion of alternative investment. And a few months later I was in New York, and I was at a CFA Society function, and they were celebrating that their portfolio reached $13.5 trillion in alternative investment. And I was like, you know, $100 billion we're celebrating, and that's $13.5 trillion. So certainly, the amount of money that is available for investors to invest, but the risk profile of Africa stops them from doing it. Not just risk profile, the visibility. We went to a private equity company. They had about 50 screens on the board where to invest. The CIOs are looking at the screens. They have NSC, they have all the different countries, Tokyo, Singapore, they're all on the board, and they can see different companies, how the share price, investment is going, what's the return and everything. And there was not one screen on Africa, not one African company visible to them. So that's what FinTech will create with marketplace like yours, that gives visibility to a new set of investors. But also when we tokenize, they don't need to now pay expensive fees to brokers and so on. They can just go there, buy a token for $500, $1,000, which means the pool of investors will increase. And I think that's how, not 100%, but we can partly close the finance gap for the continent, allow Africa to industrialize, create wealth, and as it starts having returns that are attractive, then other CIOs are going to be interested in Africa, and you'll see more private equities, VCs start looking at Africa as well. So it has to adopt FinTech, it has to create that visibility. Like when M-Pesa started, many people didn't believe that they would go far, but today the whole world is using cell phone technology for payments and so on. So I think Africa will have to lead the way here.
We welcome questions from the audience, and we have a distinguished audience today. So if there are any questions, anyone wants to put
another question, comment and question. You said it correctly. The thing is, I hear you guys talking. I'm a private investor, venture capital, private credit, everybody can hear. I'm a Maurice Info, spent 10 years in Hong Kong and Singapore. And I hear you guys talk, and everything is about money here and then Africa. Nothing's about Mauritius. And the reality is a lot of fintechs, sadly, the population here is not big enough. Okay? I've invested in 12 fintech companies, there's no market here. But there's a test case. And there's also a big market for Mauritian investors who don't have what they need. People don't have credit cards. What's our penetration here? Credit cards, do you know?
The interest rate?
No, credit card penetration here. 3-4%?
No, credit card penetration. In terms of credit card payments, for credit card...
The amount of people who have credit cards.
Every single person has 2 cards.
Credit, not debit.
Not debit, so if you talk credit, Mauritius is a debit market, where you're talking about 75% debit, 25% credit.
Okay, so everybody here has a credit card. All of you here have wallets that are about this big. Okay? You said it yourself, we don't have phones. In China, you can pay with WeChat with the palm of your hand. You can leave your phone at home. Okay? People here can't invest in a fund. A Mauritian listed fund, if any of you want to invest today, would take 3 to 4 weeks minimum. And that's only if you're an MCB client with a brokerage account. So Mauritians are not invested in Mauritius themselves. How do you want to invest in Africa, pro-Africa, become a FinTech area for the world, when we can't even invest locally? Our stock market has the potential to be great, but nobody can buy it. So only institutionals owns only 6 stocks, 7 stocks. We had this great idea for an SME venture market. Never really took off. I know we tried to list a company on there. It wasn't possible, because the access to funds from just normal people is very, very complicated. And there's a lot of wealth here. There's a lot of middle-class wealth. Jesus, look at all the brand new shiny cars everybody have on the road here. Okay? And I know it's cultural, everybody has a car that's more expensive than a home. Most of the car payments are more than a mortgage. But I'm gonna say this, America's doing something in that way. All of our investment, so our people's investment, whether it's our social security or our NPFs, or everything that Mauritians here own, and we're growing that. We've increased salaries. The lowest class of employees are getting paid more. Put inflation aside. Why are we not also investing into our country? The EDB is a development board for our country, okay? So not just a pass-through for $70 billion of American money. We need to invest here and allow our Mauritians to invest. And they can't invest. Forget investing in Kenya. Before you can do that, we're professional investors, so we can find a way. But the normal person here can't even buy a share of the MCB. And imagine if everybody's pension fund, or when they were born, a child is born, not just have savings accounts, but everybody should have a share of the Semdex. And then you can start thinking about cryptocurrencies and blockchain and NFTs, whatever you want. We do that all over the world. We've got a company that does private credit with a blockchain link on-ramp, off-ramp, financed by Temasek for Singapore and Southeast Asia. So our EDB and Mauritian government and everybody else should be financing that for here. People should be able to do that, buy their houses, have easy access to credit, payments. Because I've got an SME, let's say, payments are a nightmare. And most of our SMEs here need payments, not banking. Okay? You'll like this. But most people don't need banking. Because banking is for what? The history of banking is lending. That's what banks do. Okay? Banks are venture capitalists 60 years ago. That's all they did. Today, forget a loan, you can't even get payments done. I moved back here 5 years ago, set up companies, holdcos, closed them all now. Went back to Hong Kong because I couldn't make a payment. It cost me $40 to send money to pay an invoice that is $1,300. Do the percentage ratio. Don't do it. You can do stuff like currency cloud, air wallets, and no offense to any fintechs, it's all been done before. Let the regulator, let them come here, open a rep office. And you know what? Fund them to set up the teams, find the people, find franchisees. All this technology exists before you even think of crypto, which scares the bejesus out of everybody, especially regulators. And you're right to, because it's very new. But simple payments. Your competitor Visa bought something called Currency Cloud, which is close to doing more than 50% of Visa's revenues and flow today. That's just flows. Any SME, someone talked about sole proprietors and operators. All they want is money in, money out. Nobody's going to lend them money anyway. Money in, money out, at a fraction of the cost of what it is today. So my question after the debate is, what do you think is the reason why we're not focusing on here and helping our people? We have a fantastic event, which is full of lots of American investors, big PE funds, corporate services, funds, trusts, etc. Great, creates salaries and jobs. But we need to give those people who are getting paid access to wealth. And wealth is not money. Wealth is investment, it's growing that money, it's growing that capital, it's creating capital. These people today have cash flow, they don't have capital. Why aren't we, any of you, why aren't we focusing on that? On creating that local wealth, which emanates from all these flows and transactions and trade, which is great. But we should be making money here. All these merchants who want to buy new cars, great, but also have an investment portfolio. And an easy one that you can do with 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees. You know, we're an African, who someone said, in the IFC we used to be top. We don't even have an ETF. We don't have a local market ETF that's worth its grain of salt. The amount of companies that could be listed in Mauritius that are not Mauritian companies, that make a lot of money. People can't invest in them. So I think that's my overall question is, why the lack of focus and intention locally? Whether it's through the regulator, through the banking regulator, the operators. And we have great regulation on principle, but the execution is just tiresome, and I like your point about guidelines are treated as regulation here. Not just in financial services, in every sector. But yeah, I think that's my question.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's good for thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, but I just acknowledge that we have the minister here. Very happy to have the minister here for finance. And one of the things I was thinking is not to put the minister on the spot. I thought that was really impressive. Because me as a U.S. ambassador, I have the visibility on those kinds of challenges and issues. But I don't want to put the minister on the spot. But I think he caught some of that question. It might be really interesting for the minister to be able to sort of, one, we can welcome him here and thank him very much for taking the time to come here. It's wonderful that he supports the American Chamber of Commerce in this discussion, and maybe give him an opportunity to sort of jump in feet first right at the start.
Sorry for that. Thank you. That's the American efficiency.
You're going to use some time wise.
I haven't heard your full question, but I've caught the second part of it. So we are I will not talk about.
Yes. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
I think we will be happier if you're here.
Okay.
So then we
right.
hopefully know.
I wanted to listen. But,
yes, please. We'll be most honored.
You got to work for your money. That's
In the meantime, can I just make sure that he's introduced properly? So, I'm very happy that you're here. So this is the Honorable Mr. Dineshwar Dawri. So thank you so much for attending and for joining the event here today. We very much appreciate it. And I will let you answer the question.
Of course, I'll try. So I'll answer in two capacities. One, I'm the Junior Minister of Finance to the Prime Minister. But number two, since some time now, I'm also the chairperson of the high-level steering committee for the implementation of the government program in the Prime Minister's office. So I think both are quite complementary to each other. I will not delve into what has worked, what has not worked in the past. We all know it. You've summarized it very well. We're a forward-looking government, and we are looking for solutions. And the title, the theme of our government program is to be a bridge to the future. And that's what exactly we're going to try to do. Now, when you look at our financial services sector, one, we need to, it is focused. The financial services sector, it contributes about 14% to the GDP, with about 9% the global business sector, and about 6%, 5-6% the domestic sector. And your question had more to do with the domestic sector. And one of the focus of this government is to create a vibrant digital economy. And when you look at the digital economy, it's made up of two value adds. One is the traditional ICT economy, which contributes about 6% to the GDP of this country. And then you have the digitization of all of the services, maybe financial services that you elaborated on, financial services on an app. And if you look at any of the services economy in the world, you take Singapore, you talked about Hong Kong, the digital economy contributes about 16 to 20% of the GDP of that country. So if you take 6% with a traditional ICT economy, we have a lot of road, a lot of space to improve. And I take on board all the comments that you have made, because you have not only spoken as an operator, but also as a user. So, yes, as a Mauritian. And this government is going to be very focused on citizen-centric service delivery. And the best way to do that is by, one of the things that we will do is to improve financial services, digitalize it so that you have it on an app. And this is when you can have access to ETFs, you can have access to all kinds of financial services on the app. And one or two comments I will make here. I think the Ministry of Financial Services just had a workshop for a strategic blueprint. And in the government program also, we have talked about reinventing our financial services sector. So we will consolidate our existing financial services sector, but at the same time, the regulators here. So how can I put it very? How can I put it like in nice words? We are driven by 4 values: greater operational efficiency, fiscal responsibility, transparency, and accountability. And these are the values that will drive us in the implementation of our government program. The market is not that big. So for any investor, it's a bit difficult to find their returns if they focus only on the Mauritian market. It's not, as you said, it's not. A lot of businesses here are cash flow driven, but even cash flow will not justify investing in Mauritius sometimes. You necessarily, because of the scale of the market, you won't necessarily get the valuation for exits. So then what do you do? This is where, under this government, we will encourage startup a lot. So we want to become a startup nation. And, it's business with a purpose. So recently, we had some people visit us from the World Bank. Of course, the Americans. They landed at the airport, and they tried to find a taxi on the app. And they tried to order food on the app. They tried to order groceries on the app. So, our domestic digital economy is not that well developed. There are challenges, but at the same time, they present a lot of opportunities. Therefore, I'll ask you to be a bridge to the future. So take action yourself to begin with. And this government is growth friendly, this government is investor friendly, this government is stakeholder friendly. So whoever comes with a good investment plan, bona fide investments, this government will ensure that they find their role and they are appreciated, they are acknowledged, they are valued in this country. It's a total change of culture when it comes to investment, because of the economic situation that we are in, we are going to have to rely a lot on private sector investments to motivate and stimulate the next phase of growth for this country. So you're welcome to invest in this country.
I don't know whether my question will be elicit a shorter answer from you, or it will be Shomika's. So I think I'll have Shomika, but you have a very tight timeline. I'm also moderating your question.
Thank you, Shamina. And thank you, Honorable Minister. I think that's good guidance. Very quickly on your point there, in terms of investment, remember today we have a global village, right? You have access to international markets, international brokers, and therefore it becomes so easy to invest outside of Mauritius from that perspective, because today our stock market in Mauritius, like the Honorable Minister has said, needs a lot of improvement. When you look at the stocks there, you know, how much confidence do we have? And to your point, what you're asking is for a customer behavior shift. For that customer behavior shift to have, you have to the right framework for the investment, let's say, profitability or capital gains to happen, for that to become really something strong. And the final point on that, you know, when you talk about Mauritius in particular, I see a lot of card payments towards cryptos every month. Investment into, you know, all the top names. I'm not going to name anyone in terms of that. They're not here. They're not here. I think that's where the future needs to be. And I couldn't agree more with the Honorable Minister that is what we need to create here. We need to become, like I said earlier on, what is Switzerland to Europe. And we have the opportunity to do that in Mauritius. Because across Africa, there's not a single strong stock market. So Mauritius could become that stepping stone to make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick thing on that. So you said it very truly, Mauritius is too small for companies to list and make profits and so on. If you take the UK, you have Switzerland, over 60% now less because the FTSE has gone down since Brexit. Before Brexit, over 60% of the revenue of all listed companies is outside the UK. Yeah. So this place doesn't have to make money here for it to have an efficient stock market. It's everything's there. We have it all.
Yeah, see, as I said, there's a lot of room for improvement, to put it very politely. And we need to innovate a bit more. I mean, you're from MasterCard, yes? Yeah, so you know, like if you take an SBM ATM card, you go and draw cash from an NCB card, you pay commissions. You don't do that in any other country of the world. Yeah, these are the basic kind of innovations that we have to do in this country. So if you go to India, you have people who iron clothes or the vegetable vendors. You pay them using your payment app, and there's no commission. Yeah, so I think Mauritius has a lot of challenges, but at the same time, it offers a lot of opportunities. And the second thing, when you look at the investment landscape of this country, 80% of the FDI is skewed towards real estate, because that is where people find their returns. That is the traditional business model. So you need new investors to come in this country, so that at least we need more investments in productive sectors where the productivity of capital is higher. And this is what this government is going to stimulate. Innovation is very high on our agenda, given our existing fiscal space that we have.
Mr. Honourable Minister, we thank you for giving us your time today. I think my first question has probably been answered yourself, thanks to the gentleman in the audience. So I will just put you the question, and you may want to add what may have been missed. So economic planning, I don't need to tell you, features in the government's portfolio. And in your view, what is the role that FinTech has to play in achieving the government's vision of 2030 goals?
Okay, so you all know that we presented a government program to be a bridge to the future. And we have 5 budgets to implement the government program. So FinTech, I believe, has a very important role in 2 segments. Firstly is for the domestic sector, for more efficiency, for transparency, for accountability, for reduced cost of transaction, to make life easier for people, more affordable, more convenient, more accessible, and hopefully now people can do, one of the things, people should be able to do more e-commerce in the country. You should be able to order online more things. I understand in the past, it was a big problem because you didn't know what would end up in your parcel. But now, I think we should encourage e-commerce. But then FinTech has an important role, in my view, in the consolidation and the moving up the value chain of the financial services sector. Because, as I said earlier, we are going to consolidate the funds industry, but we need new avenues of growth. And this is where I see FinTech playing a large part. We should be able to attract a lot of FinTech from Africa, from all over the world, to be domiciled in this country. Mauritius should also become a transaction platform for Africa, or like a payments platform. And what it does in our program is we have a few macroeconomic objectives that we are looking at. We are looking at reducing public debt. We are looking at reducing the fiscal deficit, the net borrowing requirements. We are looking at improving our reserves, our net reserves. So I think through FinTech, we should be and could be able to attract more reserves in the banking sector of Mauritius. Just imagine if Mauritius could become a bigger, better clearing and settlements hub for the continent. So you have a larger flow of foreign currency in this country. And this is one of the things that we are looking at doing in our macroeconomic and fiscal consolidation framework.
Thank you. So, well, I'm probably a dreamer, but in your most utopic vision, where do you see Mauritius and Africa in 2030 then?
Yeah. So you see, Prime Minister Modi just left Mauritius and he said something about dreaming. It's good to dream. It's very good to dream. But it's not so good to not do anything about the dream. So you should try to do something about the dream. So, what was your question again? Yeah.
Where do you see Mauritius and Africa in 2030?
See, Mauritius, firstly, Mauritius is part of Africa. That's part of our DNA. We have kept saying that, but we have not walked the talk. Unfortunately, we were kicked out of the SADC for non-payment. And these are unacceptable diplomatic maneuvers. But the way I see Mauritius and Africa, we have a lot of free trade agreements with Africa that we are trying to leverage on. We are relooking at them. We are saying what are the benefits that can exist by using Mauritius as a hub, as a platform for Africa based on the free trade agreements. Financial services. You see, Africa has a vibrant young population, and the economy is on an app there. So we are trying to see. The one thing that I don't like is like people say Mauritius can be everything. Mauritius cannot be everything. So we really have to see how we position Mauritius. Are we different? Are we niche? Are we first? And where does Mauritius, what's the Mauritius story in the overall digital supply chain to FinTech or digital financial services in Africa? And I see Mauritius more as a FinTech hub, as a payments, clearing and settlements hub, as a bank of banks hub, as a broker of brokerages hub, kind of a wholesale. You see, I mean, the US ambassador is here, Your Excellency. JP Morgan just set up in Nairobi. And Mr. Jamie Dimon, I think he said that he's investing, this is the foundation for the future, because he's looking at the diaspora in Africa, he's looking at future talent. But you will not get that in Mauritius. But we'd still want JP Morgan to be here. So what, let's say JP Morgan is in Nairobi and then we'll be in Lagos, wherever it is, for the consumer market of Africa. But it can be in Mauritius as a captive service provider of technology or trade finance or treasury to its captive centers of Africa. So Mauritius really has to identify its niche role and then develop it. And I believe that by 2030, Mauritius should be able to position itself and perhaps have the first signs of activity in terms of a wholesale financial services to financial services operations of African countries.
I think we very elaborate, Mr. Honourable Junior Minister, and you've explained much more than we were expecting for the gentleman's question. So I don't know if anyone has any questions before we close today.
You're making you work with Mike. Yes, it's always good to do a little bit of walking. Well, well, thank you very much. That was a very, elaborate exchange that we've had, and thank you, Honourable Minister, for your presence here. So I've got a comment, I've got a question, and a word of caution. Okay. Yes, true. Mauritius is.
Actually, it might be good to identify yourself too.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to start. I'm Ashwin Gopi. I'm the managing partner of PwC Legal. PwC Legal is a law firm in Mauritius, which is under the banner of PwC Global. Thank you. So now, yes, true. Mauritius is what Mauritius is in terms of its market and in terms of its challenges. And the adoption of FinTech will always be a cultural thing in Mauritius. So this is what it is. Now, Mauritius has, sprung in the offshore sector by being that jurisdiction that allows business to be structured here and for the benefit of the region and also for the world. Now, for FinTech now, I'm going to give you an example. We just provided a legal advice about 2 months ago by combining what you said a little bit earlier, alternative solution, by using what when you said we have indeed a very comprehensive legal framework when it comes to virtual asset. Now, what was the problem there? We had a client from Cameroon in the mining sector, and they had a problem with liquidity. So we sat around the table and became really creative in proposing a solution using blockchain technology. So they had 2 licenses to 2 mines. Now the first one they were not going to exploit right away, but the second one they wanted to start the mining operation. So what we suggested is that we could use the blockchain technology to create a stable coin with regards to the first one, because there was a certificate from the authority identifying there was 20 tons of gold under earth. So we could stabilize it like that for a particular club of investors. And for the second one, we could create a primary and secondary market to create security tokens. Okay. Now, it works beautifully. Now, why it works beautifully is because our legislative framework allows that. And now that's creative thinking, because we're not looking at the vitals, the Virtual Asset Initial Token Offering Services Act, merely about what it says. But we're looking at all the framework, the guidance note on tokenization of security tokens. But here's the thing. There are two impediments that we identify. Now, the first one is stablecoin. Now, stablecoin is becoming more and more of a thing these days because it is the one that investors have most trust into. Now, the FSC about 2 years ago came up. I sit on the FinTech committee of the FSC. So we had, and without saying more, we had a guidance note on stablecoin, which was kind of beautifully drafted. And now you said a little bit earlier, Renu, we have the benefit of being a small jurisdiction, so we can bring about changes very quickly through guidance note, and we did. But then the Bank of Mauritius took over that because of, I can see Charlotte moving back. But the Bank of Mauritius 2 years ago took over that because of the fiat element that's involved in it. But for 2 years, we've had nothing.
If I may say
Well, it's good to know that it's alive, but it's not walking. It's bedridden. So it doesn't serve any purpose. Now, stablecoin is becoming a thing in terms of this kind of financial structuring, but we are yet to hear some sort of guidance note from the two regulatory bodies. Now, that's sort of the first thing. Now, the second thing is that, as just highlighted quite high, is that the banking that we've suffered in that area. Okay, one of the reasons why the banks, well, certainly in Mauritius and elsewhere as well, have not leapt into that system. One of the reasons being the correspondent bank, which Maurice mentioned a little bit earlier. Whether you like it or not, the American correspondent banks play an extremely important role in that sector. Now, about a month ago, we heard from the President Trump that the banks, he signed an executive orders, and the banks in America were supposed to play a more predominant role. Now, we all just got off a seat and saying "Ray," because we expected now that the whole system is going to decant. But there has been some opacity around that. So the two questions, therefore, are we, from the regulatory body here, are we going to see some, some sort of guidance, guidelines on stable coins? And probably from you, Your Excellency, is there anything at your level? Could you put in your weight to see how JP Morgan can have some sort of a presence here in Mauritius? Because indeed, Jeremy Dimon said that they will start going into that space. So probably having some sort of presence like that will be decanting the whole ecosystem in Mauritius. And a last word of caution to my good friend Shamika here. While you're struggling to remember your wife's number, just be careful. I remember it better than you. Shamika and I are good friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwin, for that question. And I couldn't resist a quick reaction to your question that, yes, it's very much alive. It's been revived again. And you would agree that stablecoin does have an interface with fiat and does have some monetary implications. But the good thing is at least both the regulators have come to a consensus how to go about it. So it's fine-tuned to what the consultation document you may have seen. And I don't see personally any reasons why it should not go out. But again, to my very initial P, one of the 3 Ps I said, I think Honourable Minister has definitely replied on the first one is the purposefulness, right? The second is the predictability of those. I mean, as a regulator, we can keep the pace and keep coming up with different products and different services and so on. But then let's say if stablecoin comes in, what you need with stablecoins for the issuers like the likes of Mindex is the scalability. Where does the scalability comes from? And I am really going to take the liberty of looking at His Excellency. Because I think the issuers of stablecoins are sitting in your world. I mean, if you read the news last week or a few days ago, one of the very big issuers of stablecoins has paired up with your competitor, Shamika, and coming up and creating more liquidity on the market. And I think that's what Mauritius needs. If we don't build up the cross-border liquidity and more raising of fundings from Mauritius, I think the Mauritian market will have its own challenge. So I'll pass on to you, His Excellency.
No, this issue of trying to get an American banking presence here has been one that basically from the time that I arrived in 2023, so I guess it's the only thing I should really be focused on, given the intensity of some of the comments and the engagement I've had with folks about this issue. But we have been trying. I mean, it is, for whatever reason, it seems to be a bit of an uphill battle, and it's meetings that I feel like I'm sort of the Mauritian ambassador to the U.S. sometimes in trying to encourage these businesses, these banks that come. We had our business summit back in August, and we did have a representative from Citibank then at that time, and again, trying to make the case. We had them interacting with different business representatives here, We also had Bank of America come as part of a Prosper Africa delegation that was in October, and I think Jessica was trying to talk to some of them, given her personal experiences with sort of doing this sort of, I think it was like practically pleading with them, like, you can't leave the country until you've committed to having a presence here. It's killing us. So, I would say, there has been an effort. It's not for lack of trying. What I've been seeing, just as my personal observation, and again, I'm hesitant to speak for the banks themselves per se, but what I think it is that there is and this is probably true of a lot of American businesses generally, they're very conservative in a way. You think of America as this dynamic, very sort of aggressive business community. Everybody's out there, living on the frontier and, finding those new areas for growth, development, opportunity. The irony is that I find it sometimes challenging for American business to look outside of the American continent and say there's a whole world out there. And you've seen some retrenchment within the banking sector. Some of the banks have been pulling back anyway as a matter of course. And then as they go through that pattern of pulling back from Africa, to say, oh, but you should look at a new opportunity here in Mauritius. And the irony is, again, we talk about how much money coming out of the United States is going through financial services here, the $70 billion. For whatever reason, they're like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. But they're not sort of saying, okay, we want to be there and see what the opportunities are. And it's not for lack of trying, but I also we won't give up. In fact, one of the things I continue to emphasize with the government is that you really want to work with them and seeing how we can reach back to the U.S. to have those conversations, to really press on these issues and try to explain that value. The minister himself is saying, what is the story that Mauritius can sell? It's like that elevator pitch that you can make. What is it you want to, grab them by the lapels? What are you going to tell them? And I think we've been trying to refine that in different ways. Talking about the regulatory environment, the connectivity, the infrastructure, the links to these huge markets, whether it's Africa, it's India. I mean, there's all these different selling points and trying to figure out how to hammer that. I think it's the line that Nixon, or Kissinger, no, this was Nixon's line. Not one of our better presidents, but he had good quotes. But the line that Nixon said, about the time you get tired of saying something, it's about the time that the other person hears what you're saying. It just bears a lot of repetition. And what we're trying to do is target those opportunities, whether it's with leadership Mauritian leadership going to the U.S., seeing how we can work with the embassy, the Mauritian embassy in the U.S., to set up interactions. There is going to be, for instance, the Corporate Council on Africa, CCA, which is one of the key chambers of the business relationship, is having its business summit, U.S.-Africa Business Summit, in Angola in June. They've extended an invitation to the Prime Minister. We're certainly encouraging that that senior leadership from Mauritius go to that conference, that business delegations, that the EDB work with the Prime Minister's office and the ministers who may be going, and work with the American Chamber of Commerce to lead a delegation there to make these kinds of cases. And the other challenge I find, and I apologize if I'm going on, but it's just, as you can see, I have a little PTSD on this, and so I have to sort of get it out through therapy. But the other challenge I find is it's hard for me as a government official to really understand and explain the full scope of the implications of not having a correspondent bank here, not having a bank presence here, the kinds of difficulties you have in the transactions, the costs that you're experiencing. And I'm also less positioned to be able to say in real, sort of practical terms, what are the real commercial opportunities? So getting the businesses to have those interactions is what we're trying to do, is facilitate a business-to-business conversation. Because I think you're better positioned to say, this is the opportunities that you're missing by not being here, and this is why it would be really good for you to be here. So that's a little bit of a summary of what we've been doing over the last 2 years since I've been here, what we're trying to do now, and how we can try to work with you, and really, we do need the voices from the private sector to make the case.
Thank you. Unless we have any questions from the panelists, I believe I thank you all. The time has come for me to thank you all for being here, especially the Honourable Minister for the use of his time, Your Excellency for always making it to us, and to our other panelists, and the regulator as well, Rayu. Thank you so much for being here. Jessica, as always, for having very thought-provocative discussions, and Shomika for freeing for your time, and all of you who I'm sure have given us your time today. Of course, the discussion doesn't stop here. And we hope it's just a starting point to go on building something stronger and more productive. Thank you, Vinay, for making the time. Thank you, everyone. I'll just pass on the mic to our very, very able MC for the concluding thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our wonderful moderator and for your engaging questions. Thank you once again to our panelists for sharing their insights. And I think it's clear from today's discussion that the future of FinTech in Africa holds great promise, and collaboration, innovation, and vision will be the keys to unlock. I think that there's been some really interesting discussions. I have to say that towards the end there, I thought it was brilliant. I just have to say that. I think now we have, I'm not sure if I can, let me go on. So we'll wrap up what I hope that you have all found to be an insightful and inspiring afternoon. I was also told to speak closer to the mic, so if you can't hear me, please let me know and I will talk louder. I'd like to take a moment to express our sincere gratitude to everyone who made today's event, FinTech in Africa, Vision 2030, a success. A heartfelt thank you goes out to, of course, the Ministry of Finance for their strategic leadership and setting the tone of the importance of innovation and policy in driving financial inclusion. The US Embassy in Mauritius for fostering strong economic ties and collaborative opportunities between the US and Africa. EDB Mauritius for your invaluable partnership and for graciously hosting us today. The Financial Services Commission for your insights on regulation and sustainable growth. It's been timely and invaluable. MasterCard for bringing a global perspective on inclusive digital finance and how it can truly transform economies. The Mindex Group for your contribution to the FinTech space and for your continued leadership and support. Appleby for expertly moderating the panel and guiding today's conversation. And last but not least, a special shout out to Coca-Cola for keeping us all refreshed during the networking session. To all our partners, speakers, and guests, thank you so much for being part of this important dialogue. We hope this is just the beginning of many more conversations and collaborations to come. So now we invite you to join us outside. We have a networking cocktail. So do take this opportunity to connect, exchange ideas, and continue the conversation. And I would say over cocktails because networking cocktails, but I believe we have wine, which for me is even better. So we've got red and white wine. So on behalf of AmCham Mauritius, thank you so much again for your presence, for your participation, and for your support in driving innovation and partnership between the US and Africa. Enjoy the networking session, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic evening ahead. Thank you.